Hi, students. Professor M again. So this is our kind of first lecture, chapters 1 and 2 in this book, Current Issues, focusing again on argument. Again, remember, well, not again, but remember that in terms of argument, everything, you have to be open-minded. And so maybe I'm even wrong about argument. Maybe character ethos is more important than kind of the logical approach that I'm taking. But to me, ultimately, everything comes down to dialectic. Can you prove what you're saying or writing? So, and that can dialectic, that means going back and forth for sure. And, but that implies or demands, requires, two people, at least two people, teacher, student, whatever, student, peer, student, tutor, or peer tutor, or embedded tutor, whatever. So let me just go over valid versus sound arguments again. And then I should say this is deductive argument or logic, which means going from general to specific. I'll get out of the way. I'm sorry. Deductive argument. And you'll see what I mean. And then we will spend, since most arguments are actually inductive, we'll go over that. Not as reliable, not as many sound arguments. And we'll get into that, and I'll use some examples like car examples, studies, medical studies on whatever topic, dementia, depression, postpartum depression, which is getting more attention again, especially from women of color who have a higher rate of, okay, how am I coming to that conclusion that women of color have a higher rate of postpartum depression than the studies? But how many people did they study? And is their research sound and all that? So you have to consider the number of people they studied. What questions did they ask them? What were their symptoms? I mean, just depression. A lot of us have had depression since COVID or during COVID, lockdown. Social media may cause, or excessive use of social media may cause depression too. So there are other factors. Well, what if the women who were postpartum also spent a lot of time on social media? How do you distinguish that from the postpartum part of it? You see what I mean? Okay, so there's a lot of tricky stuff, and you got to be willing to go back and forth and look at things and take your time, be patient, be charitable towards others. That's for sure. That's like right out of philosophy, but also Catholic doctrine. But anyway, let me get into this quickly, deductive, and then we will line up, show how it fits into writing an essay or research paper. And then we'll go to inductive. But I'm really trying to get you to not accept kind of the way we talk about arguments. And just because something's a valid argument doesn't mean it's a sound argument. And valid argument, again, just means you've got two premises or assumptions and then a conclusion. But we're not yet evaluating whether there's any evidence for this or any evidence of this. Maybe you think all humans are immortal. Okay, maybe you're Christian, you believe Christ, the paradoxical situation. He's both all human and all God. And then, so we kind of follow in his footsteps, and we actually have eternal life and all that. So you could find a lot of problems with this argument. Again, Socrates could be your cat, and therefore not a human, not the ancient Greek philosopher named Socrates. Okay, so this valid just refers to the form. All humans, notice that's a general category, are mortal. Socrates is your specific example of all humans, is a human. Therefore, this is the therefore symbol in philosophy. It's short, so I use it. It's also, I guess, a gang sign nowadays, right? Socrates is mortal. So you got all humans are mortal. Socrates is a human. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. So symbolic logic, you got P implies Q. The P refers to humans. Q refers to mortal. Socrates is a human specific. So you go P was all humans. And now we got a specific example of that conclusion, ergo, or thus, therefore, Q, Socrates is mortal. Okay. So remember, this is actually called modus ponens if you're into logic, symbolic logic, and all that. And actually, when I had to write my undergraduate thesis, it was about 80, 90 pages, printed out on the first Apple image writer. Remember, it would go, then it would go back. It took forever to print 80 pages on there, 90 pages. Anyway, I went through it with symbolic logic to check and see whether my arguments were valid. And of course, I should have said, well, yeah, but are they sound? Which I think most of them were. All right. So remember, again, the takeaway from all this, valid, just because something's a valid point or a valid argument, that's okay, but it's not great. And so it's better to have a sound argument, and which means that your assumptions are proven in your paper, your speech, your talk, your blog, your Twitter feed, whatever. Okay. All right. So how does this all line up with writing an essay then? Okay. So remember what I said in the first little intro, that your conclusion is actually going to become your thesis statement. Okay. So this is going to become your thesis. And of course, this is kind of a silly, contrived example. So don't think that this is going to be one of your assignments. It's not. You're going to have to prove, you're going to have to write about like free college, what are the problems and solutions. So you would have a different kind of thesis. And so remember, the thesis or your conclusion of your argument is going to it's going to morph with different assignments. With a research paper, it's different from just writing a persuasive essay, okay, or writing a narrative essay. All right, so the thesis always morphs because changes, it just morphs, so it depends on the kind of writing you're doing, what your purpose is, and what your thesis or the conclusion of your argument is going to be. It's still an argument. Okay, and so remember, inductive, which we'll talk about in a minute, I'll erase this, is also an argument. It's just not as good as a deductive argument because you're going from general. In a deductive, you're going from general to specific, so you know that that's going to follow. But then, of course, to make it a sound argument, what do you need to do? Add proof, evidence. And so that's what you do in your paper. This will be your thesis. Remember where your thesis goes. Formal academic paper, end of the first paragraph, probably underline it and put it in bold. There's nothing wrong with that for the purposes of this class and probably 102 as well. Then what you're going to do in the paper is go back and prove your assumptions or your premises. So essay, speech, etc. You have to prove best with sources that your assumptions 1 and 2 in our example over there are true, or in philosophy we say true statements or propositions. Okay, so that's a little tricky, but you got to have some kind of proof, and you got to have sources. You could have statistics, you could have examples, you could have other kinds of evidence, you could add details in a less formal kind of academic, non-research environment, and put in details about things and make it believable, okay? So when you make it believable, then that's proof that these assumptions, premises are true. They can be backed up. Okay, and that's what a good essay is. So in your essay, yes, I spent some time on grammar, spelling, mechanics, all that good subject verb agreement, capitalization, but also by the time you get to a final draft, I'm looking at your argument, and then I'm going to tell you. And most of us, we never quite give good arguments. If you've read even Plato, Aristotle, you know, and I really want to believe a lot of Aristotle, but there are certain limitations to his arguments, and we can't go ask him, so it's a little harder. So all arguments are kind of limited in soundness, believe it or not. So that's why you have to take up criticisms before the end of your paper. You don't just prove your premises or assumptions. You got to go into addressing what the critics are going to say about your thesis or about your evidence. Okay. And so, just as in the case that I mentioned, it's more of an inductive argument, but that, and I'm not criticizing this, but it's just that women of color have a higher rate, at least nowadays, of postpartum depressions after they have a baby. Then the critics are going to say, okay, but are they on social media too while they're at it? And then their bodies, of course, when you get pregnant, your body is going to change probably a lot. Skin, body parts, everything changes quite a bit. Hormones, all that changes. And so is the depression the result of being on social media or seeing your body changing like that, or is it the result of having a baby? So I think we got to, if you're making that argument about postpartum depression, you have to separate that out from social media depression and body dysmorphia that so many females get. Well, men now too, but just I'm a baby boomer, so that doesn't bother me. If my neck is size, 19 and a half and there's no tie for me right now or no collar, then that's just too bad. But I'm working on it, losing weight, but it doesn't really affect my self-esteem. Okay. Let's go to inductive argument. I kind of talked about it. So deductive argument is going to be the best because it goes from general humans to Socrates, as long as you can prove those things, and that's going to be good. Now we're going to go to inductive, and then actually, we don't talk about valid. So deductive argument, and again, most research writing that you do is also going to be inductive. So your argument is going to be. So for example, what you're going to say is something. You're going to give specifics and then draw a general conclusion. So let me put that inductive, general. No, you're going to go to start with specifics instead of going the opposite. So I'm just going to put specific examples. Then you draw the conclusion, a general conclusion. Okay. So let me give you an example. This is one I have on other videos. I'm going to say, see if you can follow this. Honda is a good car. Toyota is a good car. I should say manufacturer, whatever, car product. What else could I say? What are some other low-end cars? Subaru. I can't spell it. I put suburbs. Subaru is a good car. Mazda. You probably haven't seen as many Mazdas. Mazda is a good car. Now, okay, that's my argument there. And now those are all specific examples. Honda, Toyota, Subaru, Mazda. What do they have in common? Theoretically, anyway, they're all foreign-made cars, right? Probably all, I think, Japanese. So I'm going to say, therefore, Japanese cars are good. I'm just going to leave it real vague and general. What do you mean by good? Okay. But you can see that that's an inductive argument because I'm going from specific examples and then I'm drawing a general conclusion. Now, problem. You got to answer the critics. What's the issue here? Well, Hondas, like the CR-V, at least the basic model, made in Mexico. Toyota, made in Alabama. Subaru, I don't know. Mazda, I don't know. But part of the problem is going to be, well, you said Japanese. Does that mean that's going to be 100% parts from Japan and all that? Probably not. Okay, they're going to be, some of them are going to be shipped to Mexico, for example, Honda CR-V, the basic model anyway, the less expensive one, is made in Mexico, probably Aguascalientes. You can check under the hood to find out. And see, I have a little Toyota. I should check under the hood and see if it's all from Japan or not. Probably made in Alabama or Mississippi or maybe Tennessee. I forget. They just moved to another state too, probably for more tax benefits, right? So it's kind of a race to the bottom there. But in a way, they're made in America of a certain percentage of foreign parts. Okay. All right. So the problem again, well, is this as reliable? No, because you're just giving a bunch of examples and not that many, 4 examples. And so you'll see when you guys read studies in your articles, if they only have, say it's a participant study about women of color, postpartum depression. Okay, how many women participated in the study? How much overall data do they have on women of color and postpartum depression? How do they separate out social media depression and body dysmorphia separate from issues postpartum depression, where the baby doesn't always respond 100% to the parents, especially the dad, probably, right? Well, okay, in a traditional, thinking a more traditional marriage, of course, but may reject the mother, or the mother is so tired, exhausted, fatigued that affects her relationship with the child, wants a lot of attention, right? And so there are a lot of things we could bring up. So that's what we're going to tackle this semester. It's not easy, and there's no perfect argument. I can't think of anything. I guess if God made an argument, if you believe in God, then, then that would be a perfect argument. But I don't know about any perfect arguments. There are valid arguments, as we said, but that you have to prove your assumptions, premises. Otherwise, we don't know whether it's a sound argument. And even those can be really tricky because situations change. Like the car one here is an inductive argument, but you could talk about quality. I think Honda's quality's gone down a little bit. Toyota's pretty good, a little more expensive. Subaru, pretty solid, but a really small market share, I think. Mazda also small market share as far as I don't think they don't sell as many cars as Honda or Toyota. Okay. So that's all I have to say about that. Let's go over chapter 1 and 2. I'm mainly, for the sake of not going too long here, I'm mainly going to talk about kind of how the assignments work. Where's my Gara? Let me erase this really quickly. I constructed this board, well, not construct, bought it during COVID to be able to work at home. And, oof. It's come in handy. I think it's for online teaching. I think it's okay. It's not great. It does have glare in the middle. I apologize. I cannot get that off. So here's what I want you to look at in the chapters. So I'm going to actually pull out the book here. Look at the brief contents. And of course, you're going to, not going to be able to see them from here, but kind of how the book is set up. So we're going to cover critical thinking. And then we actually don't get into sound and valid arguments probably till later, but at least you'll have a little preview on that. Till we get to probably chapter 10, the logicians. It's logic, but it's pronounced logician, like magician almost. Deduction, induction, fallacy. So we're going to spend a lot of time on that chapter. You've already been introduced. Critical thinking. So you're going to have to read the arguments here, read the essays rather. And then I was going to make a comment about, oh yeah, so if you're like me, I mean, we have the word logic and then we go to logician. So if you stumble on things like that, then I'm looking for my cell phone, use your cell phone, dictionary.com or Google, put in the word, listen to how it's pronounced too. So you guys have a huge benefit over my generation where, yeah, you could do the dictionary, but then, like in grade school, I remember Sister Mary Holywater, whatever her name was, say, well, just sound it out. Okay, here was the word. So I sounded it out. Sword. And then she got all angry at me, but I was doing exactly what she said. How about this word? So English is confusing. Milk. I would say milk, and I'd pronounce the L. She said, no, it's milk. So you can see how English, since it's a smorgasbord, that's a nicer word for what English is, bastardized language with Latin, Old English, Middle English, Scandinavian words since the Norman invasion, 1066. So it's really confusing. Now we have all these computer words. We have all these social media terms. We have emojis. Really made English a mess. It's become a very informal language, but still the language of business and still, despite being very difficult, a popular language to learn. And a lot of the European universities now, EU, they teach in English, believe it or not. So these people, where Norway, Sweden, Denmark, France, Germany, they all speak really, really good academic English, and of course, street smart English too. Okay, so here's the deal. So critical thinking, It's going to ask you to thinking about thinking. I'm not real thrilled about some of these topics, but that's my opinion. You're going to have to prove that I'm wrong. Take a little quiz at the end too. Thinking as a citizen, I think a lot of people I've noticed, especially quite a few of my female students are turned off by thinking as a citizen. They're just like, I got family, I got work, I got school, and that's enough. I don't have time for this citizenship stuff or political stuff. Obstacles to critical thinking, you're going to have to read that. Essays here. So this isn't a civics course, so even though people might think, oh, politics 101, whatever, no, it's argument. And so it's kind of the basis of everything. There's kind of an absurdist essay in here. So here's also the things you should focus on. I'm a visual person. So this over here it says visual guide evaluating a proposal, page 15. Look at that carefully. And then anticipating counter arguments. I would probably use the term criticisms or your critics' ideas against your thesis or your evidence. They use the word counter arguments. I would probably use, that's counter arguments is one of them, but it's not the whole thing. So it's kind of an improper term there. Clustering your ideas. I really think this is cool. And you're going to have to do this at the end of the chapter, so be prepared. And then there's kind of an absurdist essay here, Pastafarians, which that's kind of silly. Maybe I'm wrong. So your point, you should always be bringing up a different point of view than what I bring up in class. That would be, well, in class on Zoom or in our sessions here. Office hours, approaching an issue. Okay. And then there's one on grades, and I'm going to throw out the opinion. Well, you know what? You know when you actually learn stuff after you turned in the paper, then you realize, oh, my thesis needed work, or my rebuttals needed work, or my conclusion was too cliche or too short, or didn't go back and take into account new information. So that's the kind of stuff that I'm looking for here. I really think, most of the learning takes place after you turn assignments, after the course too. And I'm still a student. I'm working on a master's degree in philosophy. I've taken 3 out of 10 courses very slowly. I've been in the program a year and I've only taken 3 courses. So, thinking critically, you can see look at the charts and graphs here. Textbooks, you may not want to have time to read every word, so you're going to have to skim it. Look for the most important. Look at the little boxes. So I'm kind of teaching you what chapter 2 is going to cover, reading the text. There's an essay in here by an Indian philosopher from San Diego State University. By Indian, I mean, let's see, I want to make sure I'm right here. Well, he talks about Indian philosophy, but it means from the country of India, not who we call, don't get it mixed up with Native Americans, okay, whom we still call Indians, okay, even though they're not. Now, you're going to have to go to assignment for critical thinking and have some notes on these different, they're just 2 questions, so have some notes on those. The first one, pick out one of the statements to talk about. So high school teachers carrying weapons, vaping, college courses should not have attendance policies, all that, okay? So my point is, you want to generate different points of view from the instructor as long as you can back them up, okay? So I'm not trying to indoctrinate people and show you propaganda. You have to You have to come to your conclusions about the novel. Well, it's not a novel, the short stories. I'm not going to have you come to my conclusions. You're going to have to come up with your own. And I had a student last summer actually. The research paper topic she chose was on inflation. And the way I set up the question was that inflation was a bad thing because, especially teachers, our wages don't keep up with inflation normally. And then this whole COVID thing and inflation kind of continues. So I set up the prompt of the research question, as inflation is a bad thing. And she found out in her research, no, inflation is not always a bad thing. And therefore, that really taught me something about argument, right? Because, and she had sources. Excuse me. Okay, so you're going to have assignments, page 36. Then you're going to get into critical reading. And I usually teach SQ3R, but this time I'm going to teach what they give you in here. They give you a list of things to look through to evaluate the author, title, place of publication, thesis, context, first and last rule. And then look at the color-coded stuff. I really like this. I'm a visual person. I've always been a visual person, which is why the only math class I ever earned an A in was geometry, because it's there. You can see it. I could measure the flagpole. I could do all that. I could figure it out. But you give me numbers on a number line, even though it's kind of visual, until you tell me, negative numbers like temperature, I could not figure that out. Chemistry, I couldn't figure out what this damn mole was, why it was so important. So this is why we need better teachers. And of course, we need, for those of us who are visual learners, you need to see it. And not all of us learn by lecture. And so you have to evaluate. You need to read these essays, summarize them briefly. And I forget what I put on there. I think like 100 words per chapter. Plus, I'll add this lecture on there as well for chapters 1 and 2. And so you need to read these. You have to start having opinions and coming up with arguments. Valid, sound is better, deductive or inductive arguments. And then there's a little assignment here at the end. Critical summary, page 74. And so you have to do that as well. Kind of keep it brief, but make sure you learn something. Don't just go from assignment to assignment. And of course, don't just use chat, GBT or whatever it's called, GPT, whatever. Okay, we have software now that checks for that, so please don't do that. So I didn't end up writing a lot, but we'll continue next week and with a new lecture and move on from here. In the meantime, start reading, read smart. I would say use pencil, highlight, or if they give you an ebook, then there's ways you can make notes. You can use note cards. I always like those yellow tabs, legal tabs, and that's what I use when I'm a student. And I keep track of everything in there. Get a binder you can add pages to. And so that's it. I don't want to take up any more time. And I'll get this posted so that you have an idea where we're going. Okay. All right. Good to talk to you. See you office hours and on our Zoom session. Okay. Highly advise you come to the Zoom session. Okay. Much as I don't like Zoom, we will have to do it anyway. Okay. For your benefit. Okay. All right. Bye-bye. Take care. Thanks.